Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Perro, and I am the author of Lucky, a novel which was inspired by Taylor Swift's folklore and the incredible true story of Standard Oil heiress Rebecca Harkness. Today, I'm going to be talking with another author, Jan Brogan. She just jumped on, so I am going to invite her really quick, and then we can get started. Okay, I just sent Jan a request.
Hi, Christina.
Hi, Jan. How are you?
Right.
Good. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So I have a little introduction that I've written up for you, so we can start with that. Um, Jan Brogan is an award-winning journalist and novelist based in New England. She has freelance work that has appeared in the Boston Globe, as well as several regional and national magazines and a variety of essay competitions. She is also the author of 4 murder mysteries, one of which was purchased by Transactional Pictures for development into a TV series. Jan was kind enough to join me today on Instagram Live to chat about her newest book, The Combat Zone: Murder, Race, and Boston's Struggle for Justice, which came out recently. How long ago did The Combat Zone come out?
Just in the end of September. So just
Okay.
just a few weeks, ago.
Okay. And I read in your, I don't know, maybe on your website or in the book that it is a 10-year project, 10 years making.
It's really 12 from beginning to end, but who's counting?
Wow. So for those of you who don't know what this book is about, it's about the murder of a Harvard football star named Andy Puopolo, and the kind of events that transpired after his stabbing, and his case kind of got made into a racial issue in many ways. And so Jan really brilliantly tells a very full, like holistic view of this story, because I think that probably in the 1970s, when this story was taking place, the mainstream media was the primary source of information. And so I doubt that anyone got as full of an understanding of the case at that time as you did, and then the readers do through reading this book. And that is just really, really cool.
Oh, thanks. Well, that's the beauty of history. That's the beauty of looking back. You get a lot more angles to the same story,
So how did you start writing this book? What originally piqued your interest with this case?
So it began, when I finished my last murder mystery, I kept saying, I'd written 4 of them, and I just felt like I needed to do something different, something new. And I kept saying around town where I lived to people that I was looking for a story that really needed to be told, And so when I came, someone heard me say that, and they introduced me to Andy Puopolo, who is the victim's younger brother. And at the time, he was looking for a screenwriter, because they were working with a Hollywood director to try to make a film out of it. And I agreed to write the screenplay on spec, but movies are very iffy. It's like buying a lottery ticket. I knew that the odds of getting it made weren't great. So I said, I'll be willing to do that on spec, which means I don't get paid until the film comes out. If I can do this, if I have the right to do the book myself and in my own way, because I'm a journalist. So I've got to, I've got to do it as I see it. So that's how it came about. And so I spent a year writing a screenplay that never went anywhere. And then I spent a year and a half writing a book proposal. And then I had one publisher who wasn't going to give me advance, but they wanted me to write it on spec. And I said, no, this is like way too much work to write on spec. So I dropped the project for like 5 years. And then 5 years later, the publisher, I get an email saying, Jan, we'd like to go through with this project at this time and offer you an advance. 5 years later, I was working
Wow.
I was working in the University of Massachusetts, the president's office, as a senior writer and writing, speeches and stuff. And I really wanted to do this book. So I quit. And then I spent the next year and a half just really grinding this out. And then 3 weeks after I delivered it, the publisher announced it was going out of business.
No way.
So it took me and my agent another, so that was 2018. It's 2021. So it took 3 years to, it took about a year to find another publisher and then to go through that process and get it published. So that's how this story came about. But I was really fascinated with Danny's story, and how, and when I first got into it, it was, what must it feel like to be the brother or sister of, or the brother of someone who was murdered, and to have what you think is justice given, and then have that justice taken away. What does that do to the family? What happened? And then Andy's name got caught up with all the trials. His name got caught up both with the combat zone, which was people they want to blame the victim. They want to say, oh, you were in the combat zone, which is a red light district, and at the time was like crazy. But he only went as part of it was part of the Harvard ritual. He went there with 40 other football players. They were in a club having drinks. He was in his car about to go home. I mean, he was totally innocent. And then people keep wanting to blame him, and that's really a common thing. It's really hard for the family. And he was really, he got killed because he saw one of his friends in trouble and he went to save him. Mm-hmm. And then, so his name got caught up with that. And then his name got caught up with when the racial issues came. And even though he had the best racial relations on the team, he was nothing, like that. It had to do with the way they prosecuted. It had nothing to do with him. So that's where I started. And then when I started to try to understand what happened between those two trials, I got fascinated by the changes in the city and the changes in the criminal justice system that were very necessary, And, I come from a family of lawyers. My father was a lawyer. I worked in his law office. Two of my brothers are lawyers. My husband's a lawyer. So I was intrigued by the complex, by the case itself and some of the legal issues.
Wow. So going into the story, did you kind of already there were all of these changes that took place, and I might be losing you. Okay. Did you know that all of those changes had taken place and that they could be tied to this case, or was that something you kind of uncovered as you were learning more about the story?
So I guess I knew a little bit and I uncovered more, I guess is the way it would work. The fascinating thing about putting yourself back in the 70s, the cities like Boston, which today is rich, full of luxury condominiums you can't afford to live there, they were really, really poor. And you could not give, and the crime was intense. Like, we tend to think that we're living through the worst, most divisive time. But in the 70s in Boston, I mean, people were firebombing each other's houses. I mean, the racial issues, partly because of busing, but partly because of the city was, it was very divided along ethnic lines, and a lot of cities where they all had their like Irish neighborhood and their Italian neighborhood, and, their Jewish neighborhood and their Armenian neighborhood and that kind of stuff. But Boston was particularly rigid and particularly violent. And, for Blacks, it was, had to be a living hell.
Wow. It is insane that like, it's crazy that we still have some of these problems related to race going on in our society, but it is very interesting to put it in perspective. I really enjoyed reading about this issue throughout your book. I think you did a really good job at showing the transformation, and not necessarily a good transformation. In fact, I think that it went from bad to worse throughout the course of your story as far as racism in Boston to a certain extent.
Well, I think it was worse during busing. Busing was really not a good solution. It created more. I mean, I could see why the judge did it, given the school committee's actions and how how intractable they were. But it was really, it just caused the middle class to leave the city. And
Yeah.
And when the middle class leaves the school system gets worse. So
Right.
it didn't solve any problems. Boston, it went through a lot. It still has a way to go. Still has a long way to go. But compared to the 70s, things have improved. I mean, but obviously it still has a long way to go.
Right, for sure. I was really intrigued at the beginning of the book how you like introduced these two juxtaposed visions of Boston. One of like, the romanticized Harvard football players. There were black football players at
Yeah.
this time.
Yeah.
Black football players who were in the car with Andy, who murdered that night. But that was a really interesting juxtaposition against the combat zone, which, like you said, was Boston's red light district at the time. Anything lawless.
Yeah. It was also mob owned. The mob was in the 70s. The mob was like really rich, and they were coming off the whole Godfather movie glory thing. So the mob was glamorous, and it was and cops were taking money. Cops were on the take, and the corruption of Boston had a huge, I think, role to play in Andy Puopolo's death. The corruption of the police department.
So, man, that's crazy. I wonder if things are better today. I mean,
in terms of corruption.
Yeah.
No, the Boston Police Department, I mean, there's always going to be some corruption just because of the nature of man. But and there's always, a new revelation from the Boston Globe Spotlight series, but it's much smaller. They've come a long way, and they get awards all the time for community policing. And you notice, like, I didn't say this in the book, but I wanted to, like, in all the shootings of blacks by police, none of that happened in Boston. Boston's called the most racist, often gets labeled the most racist city in the nation, but none of that happened in Boston because of a lot of the improvements the police had made. So it has, the police department, I think, when you start looking at it, particularly in the 90s, and particularly under Mayor Flynn, there was a concerted effort to put cops on the street, in the neighborhoods. And, I don't know if that's happening now. Probably, I don't, right now, after all that's been going on in the city, with all the defund police, I don't know what's going on now. But I know they're talking about reform, and I know they're having a hard time with reform. But, reform it's the police union that stops a lot of reform. So.
And it's never linear. So,
right.
There's going to be some periods where like things are better and some things, are worse. So,
yeah.
Are you based in Boston?
I live in Dedham, which is right outside of Boston. I mean, it's like the first town. Yeah. So, and Boston is very small geographically. So, like, if this were another city, this would be part of Boston, just, so very close.
So when you were a journalist, you were in Boston, right?
Well, yeah. So I was a journalist in Worcester, which is a little bit out west, and Providence, which is Rhode Island. And then I worked for the Boston Globe for about 10 years as a correspondent, which is, more like as opposed to staff there every day, it's on assignment. I see.
And you were more in the financial sector, correct?
No, when I was at the Globe, I covered medicine and science mostly, and arts, interesting, and the arts. So those are kind of my two very different but very pleasurable areas. So that's sort of, I did business in Worcester and at this Providence Journal.
Okay. I was trying to, understand whether or not you had some history with, the journalism aspect into some of these issues before you started writing the book.
Yeah, well, you sort of needed to be a journalist to write this book because you had to call a lot of people, and you had to find a lot of sources, and you had to find novel ways to find new sources, which is really 40 years, or I guess it was 35 years after the fact, is like, that's the hardest thing. It's really hard to find people, you know?
For
So
all the people watching, Jan interviewed almost like I think that you at least reached out to
yeah,
everyone living who was involved in this entire situation,
yeah,
from the night of the incident to, you know, the actual court cases. You were trying to find jurors. I was really impressed and blown away, actually, how many different sources you had.
yeah.
How did you find them all?
You know, I wrote, sometimes, you know, it's hard now because people don't answer their phones, right? So in the old days, you would just call, you know, call people and they would answer their phones. And now you can't get their, so I would use that, like some of those criminal checkmate kind of services to get some addresses. Sometimes I would just mail out letters to anybody with that last name in Boston. Are you related to, are you, you know, do you have any, and I had one, I was really wanting to find Edward Soares, that's one of the defendants, some of his family members. And I sent out a bunch of letters, and I had this, and he was of Portuguese descent, and I had this Portuguese woman, she would call me, she was great. She said, I don't know him, but we are a tech community, and I have got this out. We are looking everywhere for him.
Oh
You,
my goodness.
you know, so
Wow.
people are wonderful. People really, you know, people really are wonderful.
And I think that when you have like a good cause and something that you really care about and believe in, it's interesting to see how things fall into place when you put in the effort.
It's true. It's true. Or you have to really just be very, very persistent,
Yes.
and you know, not give up when you want to.
So how, like, I don't know. So I actually wrote a book and released it this year, and it took me about a year. To write. And I genuinely don't know if I would be able to sustain my attention to one, you know, story for that long. How did you? Was it just the story was so moving to you?
Yeah, I felt very compelled to tell Andrew Puopolo's story. I really felt that he got lost as a victim. He got lost. He became a political football, and I really wanted to rectify that. Now, along the way, you know, I started to see how many Black victims there were of murder who did not get justice because of the way the juries were. You know, that did not even get written about. Um, so, you know, I started to think about, you know, criminal justice in general, you know, and you know, the family members, you know, what they go through, and you know, they just want the maximum justice, right? You want the maximum justice for your loved one. And I think the prosecutor plays a large role in telling you what that maximum justice is. Like, the Puopolo family never wanted capital punishment because Massachusetts doesn't have capital punishment, right? They just wanted the maximum, which was, you know, all 3 Black men in prison for the rest of their lives, because that's what the prosecutor said was justice.
That
You know?
is thing. It makes me think about how our sense of right and wrong
Mm.
is so determined by the way things are framed, the rules that are set, etc.
Yeah, and you know, it's just it's you know, it's, even if everything goes correctly, even if, you know, whatever the prosecutor tells you is maximum justice and you get it, and there is no appeal or second trial, or, you know, anything's overturned, it's still kind of, you know, it doesn't necessarily, it's still a difficult process. It's still a very painful process because you have to go in court, you have to listen to people say exactly, and this was a very, very brutal murder. I mean, he was stabbed, the knife twice, once in retreat, and the knife went in through his stomach and up 6 inches into his heart. So that means, you can't do that accidentally. You know,
Mm-mm.
that was a brutal murder, and the family had to hear those descriptions over and over again. And when he got off with manslaughter, they were devastated, as I would be.
Oh my goodness. I really liked how you explored both the psychological backdrop of families in general, not specific,
Yeah,
not necessarily specific to this family, but there is so much that has been documented where this is like one of the hardest things that you have to go through. And part of the reason for that is that idea of justice. And I enjoyed seeing Danny, his brother, wrestle with that through his story.
yeah. For me, his story is what carries the whole book.
Oh, I mean, it's definitely, yeah, the
Yeah,
thread
yeah.
and throughout for sure. Was it emotional hearing these stories from Danny?
Um, it was over such a long period, and I would, I wanted him to get closure, but he didn't. He was not. He didn't get closure, and I don't know if there is closure, and I don't think this book solved anything for him. But I did my best.
Oh yeah. And I think that you did a beautiful job of telling the story. I don't know if anything can really make better
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
And it's easy to romanticize things and think that they will.
Yeah.
Did like that. So kind of a spoiler alert. I don't know if it's a spoiler, but end of the book, Jan includes a letter from Danny
Yeah.
that I thought that was so interesting and important that you included that. And of course you did, but Jan gave Andy's brother the opportunity to write something to just kind of tell his side of the story.
Yeah.
And he said that, the story wasn't what he was looking for necessarily. But that I liked how he said, we'll see.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
like, we'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
I think that your story is like, it tells the facts, but it leaves the subjective up to the reader. And so like, I can understand how that might be nerve-wracking to just kind of have people presented with all the facts and then get to make their own opinion about what happened. But I think the truth is clear, and that,
Well, thank you. That's like about the highest praise I can get, because that's what I really wanted. I really wanted people to see the facts and to decide for themselves, because that's a problem I have with journalism today. I don't like to be told how to think. I don't like yeah, I don't like the newspapers or this TV show. I don't like to be told how to think. And I get my back up. And so I try, in all my writing, journalism, I try to give both sides of the story. And I teach journalism in the summers at BU. And that's what I tell my students, that if you believe in something, if you're covering something, you believe in this, say it's a protest, wholeheartedly, the more you believe in it, the more you have to go find what the other side says, because you need that balance, otherwise you're just a propaganda machine.
Yeah, you just, the whole idea of ideology and ideological groups are something that I've been thinking about lately a lot. And I think that with the discussion about race, like, often people do get very ideologized into their like group, and then they start believing what other members of their group have to say without doing the critical thinking for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that could be part of what is leading to this crazy polarization that we're seeing in our society.
Yeah. People comment or get upset without just reading the headline. They don't actually even read the story sometimes, or
That's and many times do you read an article where the headline
Yes,
supports the actual story?
exactly. It's, it's because it's clickable.
Yeah. So you were kind of in journalism in one of its more golden ages, I guess,
Yes, yes,
or
yes.
this instant,
Yeah,
instant journalism where, somebody can send out a tweet and that's like how people go to get their breaking
right,
news.
right, right. So
What
it's,
what do you think about the changes that have happened in the past like 20 years?
I don't, you hate to like, long for the old days, but I, there's a lot of pressure to have clicks and everything, and there's an ongoing, controversy right now in journalism. Like, can you really be objective? And you shouldn't even pretend to be objective. Um, and for me, that's like, are you kidding? If you're not pretending to be, I started off and I was in college. I worked for an alternative press, and
Okay.
I thought I was like, a hippie. I wanted to be a counterculture, and I interned there for like a semester, and then I was like, I realized I'd go to the meetings and they'd tell me what the news was before I went to report it. They were liberal, but they were telling me how to think before I even got there.
Yeah.
And when I went to like mainstream journalism, when I worked with regular editors, I felt like I had so much more freedom because I could come back and say, no, you were wrong. That didn't happen. This is what happened. It didn't have to be there. It didn't have to be decided before I went out. I mean, now you always kind of know how the editor wants the story to go. I mean, what's going to get you on the front page or not, but you,
Sure.
you,
Yeah.
you, you,
That's
you
though, because I almost would think that it would be opposite, that more of an independent like journalism source would be more focused on the truth rather than the editor's you
That's
know.
what I thought. That's why I interned there. That's where I saw my career going. But I'm just not I'm not in favor of advocacy journalism. That's not my thing. It's, other people can do it. It's just not for me. And me right now, I love history. The history, when you look back on a case like this, you you can see, because you've got the time and you can put it in, you know, political and sociological context, you can see the forces. When you're reporting as it's going on, you can't possibly see that.
Yeah.
That's why I love history. Because you can have perspective.
Yeah, no, that's so true.
Yeah.
Have you always loved history?
I've always loved history. I remember being like you know, 6 or 7, like 6 or 7 years old. My parents taking us to Mount Vernon, in DC, and George Washington's first home, and just being, oh, and Monticello, and just being fascinated. I'm also right now with my agent. I have a historical fiction, about the
Ooh.
women whaling with their husbands in the 1800s, and so I just love for me, escape is being in the past. For some people it's the futuristic and, a lot of fantasy. But for me, my escape is to go into the past. I just love the past.
I really appreciate that, because I mean, the past and those true like first person sources, being actually where something occurred, seeing for yourself what happened, that is so important and powerful,
Yeah.
because then you're getting like, you're able to create your own worldview a
Right,
little more,
right,
I think.
right.
Something that I explored in my book, I didn't know this before I wrote my book, but so before ancient Greece, history was just written in ordinal lists with no attempts to connect the dots. And
Yeah, yeah.
then the first history book that is like, history books today, where it kind of tells the story, was written by this guy named Herodotus, who went around and tried to get as many firsthand accounts and primary sources as he could to like corroborate the stories and figure out exactly what happened. And then
I didn't know.
that is used as like kind of the background or the foundation of a lot of like modern day history,
Yeah, yeah.
which is super interesting. And like, some people call him the father of histories
Yeah,
and
yeah,
some people call him the father of lies.
yeah. Well, there's that. You know, everybody's history is a little different. It's not like history is objective necessarily. It's everyone's got a different take on it. So, which is why I try to talk to as many people as I can, so I can get different takes and not just one aspect.
And you did such a good job with that. Like and for those people who are watching and haven't read this yet, like even the people that she wasn't able to contact, she mentions throughout, I contacted this person, but they wouldn't interview with me unless I paid him a lot of money. So we marked that one.
Well, the most interesting aspect for me of this process was when we did the screenplay, we thought Leon Easterling, who was the murderer, was dead. And as a matter of fact, in the screenplay, thank God, he's a character in the screenplay. Danny thought he was dead. I thought he was dead. And then one day he emailed me. And he said he wanted to meet me. And the reason he knew me, because I was on the Universal Hub asking for people who knew. It's like, Universal Hub is like a online publication, and it's got a great chat, and anybody who knew him or anybody who knew any of these people. And he emailed me, and I asked him all these questions to like to understand if he was he was real, and he knew all the answers. He was real, and then he wanted to meet me, and then but he wanted me to pay him for his story, which journalists don't do. So, but then he followed me he passed away. But then he was following me for a long time. So, I mean, online, so
sometimes I saw him.
Yeah.
But he was standing there.
Yeah. Like he was an older man. I wasn't worried, but it was just weird,
That is weird. And, I remember the part of the book where, Danny thinks that Leon had HIV.
Yeah.
And then he kind of just assumed he died, right?
Yes, right.
So how was that for Danny when you broke the news that
I had to break Danny is an awesome guy. He really is an awesome guy. And he was great throughout all of this. I know what it was. He offered to go with me to meet him. And I said, I don't think I should do that. I don't think we should do that.
For those of us who are just watching and who don't know, because for a very long time, Danny had a serious vendetta where he was, contemplating hiring a hitman.
Yeah.
So, all types.
Yeah. So
Wow.
Charles Walker, who was also, he had been, I don't know. I can't remember how I first met him, but he had been the head of the Boston Anti-Discrimination Commission for a long time.
Ooh, I can't hear you. Oh, there.
Oh, good. Yeah. No, there. I had a call come in, so I just.
Oh, no worries.
So he was a Black lawyer, and he took a professor. And so he was the one who taught me about the significance of this case on the legal process, and how it ended what had been a really common practice of just in Boston and everywhere of just striking potential jurors because they were Black, making sure you had no Blacks on your jury. If you had Black defendants and a white victim, you were the prosecutor or the defense, so you would just make sure that you got rid of all of them. And had this case, and why this case was so important. So he really,
absolutely.
He was really the one that taught me why this case is still relevant.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is still so relevant. That's what I was thinking the whole time. I was like, man, what a really fitting book to come out right now. I think that having a more complete understanding of this story helps put current events into a little bit better perspective.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah. So who was I know that you really, empathized with and connected a lot with Danny.
Yeah.
But who was the most interesting person that you talked to throughout this process?
Well, Tom Lincoln, who was the other Harvard football player who was stabbed that night, he was fascinating. And Norman Zalkind, who represented Leon Easterling in the second trial, he was just so well. He's in Boston. He's like a renowned lawyer. He's a great lawyer. He was just so candid and honest with me about everything. It was just from a journalistic perspective. It was just and also objective. He could see both sides. You know what I mean? He was just a pleasure. You know, to get to know and to and hear his take on it. And he gave me access to all his files, which were a lot of the prosecutors, like what they got, the things I wouldn't have. And, you know, Danny got me the transcripts. Then I got, of the first trial, I got the second transcripts from the Social Justice Library. But so I think that you know, Danny's father, you know, the Puopolo family, the father is such a class. He's still alive. Such a class act. And, you know, just and also some of the media, like Susan Warnick, people who would help me. She was a media star. People who would offer their hand were just great. And then, like, I had a prison guard call me, you know, contact me at the Blue. I met a guy Ray Mulphy, who first didn't want to be named, but then said it was okay, who had been a bartender in the combat zone and knew Leon Easterling and could tell me stories. And there are other people, like, there are stories I didn't tell, not from him, but there are stories I did not tell because I couldn't tell them without giving away. Even if I didn't name the person, I would give away who they were, and they wanted to be anonymous. So I know a lot more about Leon Easterling than is in the book. But I didn't print it. So, and then also about Soros, huh?
How did you decide, you know, because some of this stuff, like, I mean, it doesn't always paint the people, you know, in the best light, you know. So how did you decide what to include, what not to include?
Well, in terms of the defendants, much of what I've learned was already was going through documents, right? So there's a lot of legal documents. So that helped ground the book. So, and also, I mean, I tried to find the two prostitutes, but I could not find them either.
Oh, yeah.
I think one of them is dead. I'm pretty sure one of them is dead. That was the problem with this book, was people I wanted to talk to had died, you know, and it, you know, if you're going to do a historical book, do it like 70 years ago or 10 years ago. Don't go 45 years because
yeah, possibly get to all primary sources.
Yeah, some people will be alive, but many of them will be dead, and there'll just be enough people alive to argue with your take on history. So,
yeah, so true. But still valuable that you were able to get everyone's perspective on this story, especially since it was such a, you know, kind of fundamental case that impacted the way the system worked moving forward.
Yeah, Henry Owens, who was Richie Allen's attorney. That was one of the three defendants, and he's the one who didn't even touch. He wasn't involved in any kind of physical altercation at all. But he was arrested and you know, for murder. So his attorney, Henry Owens, was also incredibly valuable because he had been through both trials. He's the only attorney who had been at both trials. And he was he had a lot of really good insights and interesting take on things. So he's really and also like a renowned lawyer. Lawyers are really good sources because they're natural storytellers. So and Tom Mundy was the prosecutor who was like famous in Boston. a lot of his, I had to go to his friends. So I had some of his friends who gave me some, that were able to help me create. They were lawyers too, help create, because his family didn't want to talk about him either. So,
Yeah.
that's where I went. So it's,
That's interesting. It's crazy how many lawyer connections you
yeah,
have.
yeah.
Did you have your husband or father read your book to kind of like vet it from a legal perspective, or did you kind of know what was okay and what wasn't?
Yeah, so my father's passed away, long passed away. My husband doesn't practice law anymore, but he did read it for me. So he could give me some key concepts. So I did not have a lawyer vet it, which I'm really thrilled. Lawyers Weekly just did a piece on it, and it was very, very positive. So that makes me feel really good that I got everything right,
Yeah.
or enough right. So
Oh, 100%. It is
yeah,
a very unsettling feeling for the first couple days to have a book out and you haven't heard what, don't know what people are gonna think or say about it.
yeah. So I used enough research books, and also, I mean, the research books on this. I can't. You just, my office is still filled with paper and books, but uh, they were super helpful in being able to put things in perspective.
Oh, absolutely. That was,
Oh,
I mean,
I was gonna say I read enough of them that and saw mistakes that they little mistakes, because I would know stuff because I would have the transcripts, So and I thought, okay, no matter how good a writer, there are going to be little mistakes. So that was helpful.
yeah, yeah. There's no way to create a
Yeah,
254 ever long
yeah,
page story without
yeah,
not being perfect,
yeah,
but part of life. That's like
yeah.
the full balance of things. Um, what was like one of the best books or most, what book did you learn the most from when you were prepping for this book and writing this book?
You mean as terms of research or as a writing model?
I guess in terms of research, but even
So,
more so. Well, let's start with that.
so in terms of research, there's Common Ground by Anthony Lucas, but I think it's Robert. I'm going to butcher his last pronunciation. It's Forminosa, and it was it's called Busing. Is it called Busing? I think it's called. I have to get it through my files. It's probably it's in the back of my book, which I used. It's about the busing crisis. It's about Boston and the busing crisis. And what he did was he really got into the history of Boston and the ethnic divisions, and explained how really, you know, the poverty of the city had a huge role in the busing eruption. And
Mm,
the way Boston was, like, everybody rich went out to the suburbs, or anybody with any money in the middle class went out to the suburbs, and the suburbs weren't included in busing. So you were really asking people to, the poorest people who were the most struggling to put their kids on a bus and go to a neighborhood they considered unsafe.
mhm.
And so he really put a lot of that in. I think he's a sociologist, Robert Formisano. He really put. I found that really, really useful,
Okay.
and Common Ground too.
Okay. Those sound
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Now you have my peeked about writing style. What book have you found most influential in general for writing style?
So for this particular book, this book is not, I read a lot of narrative nonfiction, like Sebastian Junger, The Perfect Storm, um, uh, Black Mass by Dick Lear, but they're actually there for a lot of it. Like, a huge component of the story is still going on, so they can actually witness it live and create scenes because they're there, right? In this, it's 45 years ago, but when I started, it was 35 years ago.
Mhm.
So it was really more, I had to kind of make history come to life as opposed to narrative nonfiction. So one of my favorite authors is Eric Larson, like Devil in the White City. Yeah. I mean, no, yeah. So he would probably be, my model for that. And I don't know, it was King Leopold's Ghost. Was also a fabulous book. Let me see if it has.
Okay.
And so I was really looking at history books. I'm trying to think. Stephen Fox, Wolf of the Deep. So, and some of these books I would come across because I was doing research for my book, but I was like, oh my God, what a great writer.
Yeah.
So
I think that the best way to like learn how to write is by reading.
Yeah.
I've definitely picked up a lot from every book and every author.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yes. So this one, the structure, like, I think because I started with a screenplay, so there was already one story almost done. In terms of my mind, it's the structure. I knew how to structure Danny's story. But it was weaving the other elements into that. And I think, and it just kind of came to me, like I didn't like map it out. It just, I mean, obviously it was first I have to rewrite some of it, but it just kind of came to me. And I think that was from reading so much Eric Larson.
Yeah. I really like Eric Larson too. For my book, I go between two perspectives. One that's more of a story of a timeline of events, and one that's more like first person of something that's happening in a different time. But like, have you seen the TikTok trend? Mama tells me that it's okay.
No, I haven't, but I have to get on TikTok. Yeah.
So basically, it's like somebody will say something that they're doing that's out of the norm, and then song Mama said that it was okay, they'll put pictures of somebody who already did what they're doing to like prove that it's okay. But I were to do that with my book, Eric Larson's Devil in the White City would be the one that I chose.
Oh, really? So did you write nonfiction or fiction?
It's fiction, but it's based off a true story.
Mm-hmm.
And so how I got like the backbone of her story was a journalist right after she died wrote a biography about her.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
But the book is like really rare and hard to find. And the person rose to popular culture fame recently because she was the star of one of Taylor Swift's songs. So I found the book and then I was able to kind of do my own thing with it, which was really cool.
That's great.
But
I think I need to turn on a light. It's like gotten really dark here all of a sudden.
Oh yeah, it is a little later over there.
Yeah.
Here. I think that journalism, like having that knowledge of, finding a way to get the whole story as much as you can and then presenting it as it is. I think that like mindset and thought, just that thought process is really helpful in storytelling and making sure you're telling a balanced story. And I'm interested as to how your experience in journalism helped you write your first book for more like murder mysteries. Or
I'm just going to turn on this light because it's so dark, but yeah. So there were things I had to learn and unlearn from journalism. Journalism. One of the things I had to, what's good, when you're a journalist, you're always listening to people. You're interviewing them. You're really listening to what they say and looking for the nuance and truth and lies. But you're used to listening to people. And I think that really helps with dialogue because you really get how people talk. So I think that's an advantage. I think I actually learned from the story structure. I think after I wrote my first novel, when I went back to journalism, I was actually a better journalist, particularly for like long form. I learned things in writing that I was able to apply to journalism that I didn't learn in journalism. Having a goal and obstacles and overcoming those obstacles and then coming to, resonance, using repetition for resonance. That I learned from novel writing. Also, the thing about journalism is I think the biggest difference is in journalism, you need like thousands more facts than you use because you have to have the perspective to decide which facts to use, right? So just you need to know a lot more so that you know what to leave out. And in fiction, a little bit of fact goes a long way.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And I mean, also, especially with this book and journalism in general, you have to really get those facts from a reputable source. Like you can't just, read an article on
Right,
Instagram
right,
or Twitter,
right,
like use
right.
that as a source. So yeah, journalism is definitely a lot. Why? Do you enjoy writing more? Do you enjoy writing fiction more, or do you enjoy more of this narrative nonfiction?
Um, I, I, well, this, I'd say I probably enjoy writing fiction. Writing fiction is easier. I mean, nothing could be harder than this book. This book was really, really complex. It was really hard to write.
Oh,
Um, and to keep it simple and to keep the tension mounting and to keep it engaged while sticking with the facts. So this book was really, really hard. Fiction seems like a piece of cake in comparison, but this is the thing I often use it. So one of the techniques I use from journalism when I'm writing journalism and I'm stuck or I'm losing, like you said, losing passion for it, I'll do more research. And whenever I research and talk to somebody and find out, it energizes me to write and it gives me new perspective and I find it really, really valuable. I would do the same thing in fiction. If I was coming to, you come to that middle part where it's so like it can, you've through the excitement of the beginning and now you're like, you can see the slog ahead. I would go interview more cops. I would interview, my mysteries. I would go out and talk to experts and then I would be revived, So, but
that is, I can't wait to read some of your mysteries. And what is the deal with I mean, if you're not allowed to talk about it, we don't have to, but with the TV deal that you have?
So the TV deals, this is so bizarre. The other thing about fiction is it's so serendipitous, I mean, it's just, I got an email, from a Rhode Island director, Michael Carenti, who said, I would like to meet you, the idea of using your book. I was like, is this guy, I mean, I actually thought about not reply. I thought he was fake, it was like, I almost didn't reply. And then I wound up meeting him and he wound up selling the idea to Steven Soderbergh, transactional films, and Philip Fleischman. So they, this has gone on forever. And then they actually, first it was an option, then they actually bought the rights. They got the funding and then COVID happened. And so I'm always like, yeah, it's probably, because projects die, and I just talked to them like in April, they contacted me. They wanted more documentation, legal stuff for the early options. And I talked to Michael a couple of weeks ago. He's the creator. And he said he was in Hollywood interviewing directors. So, yeah. So,
Very exciting.
yeah. So I don't know what platform it's going to be on. But I do know it's moving forward. It's based on my character Hallie Ahern. It's very different. It's very different. It's updated. She's now Asian, where she was half Irish after. So a lot has changed. But she's a gambling addict, and she's from Rhode Island, and that's what they liked.
Okay, that is very interesting.
Yeah.
How does it make you feel to know that your book is kind of taking on a new life in this way?
The way I look at it, like Michael was really worried when he showed me the pilot that I would be upset because of the changes. I'm like, it's a different art form, I mean, it's a different art form. So if I feel like I was happy for him. I wanted to succeed for him, and so he's free to do whatever he needs to do to make it succeed. And I'm just happy my name's attached to it,
Yeah, that is
in a small way,
really
you know? Yeah.
very cool. So are you kind of off with it where they're kind of just taking the reins and approving things with you, but other than
Yeah.
that,
Well, so once it goes into production, I'm a consultant. Like on the monthly, I get some money for being consulting. I don't know how much they actually want my opinion. I would gather probably not much, but I think Michael will let me onto the set so I can see what's happening. So that would be fun. Yeah, at least
that
a couple, as long as I don't, so that would be fun. So, I just have to be helpful because all these things, you just got like, I always say being a writer, particularly fiction writer, even this, it's like playing the lottery for a living. I mean, that's really what it is. And there's the excitement of buying the ticket, and sometimes some of your numbers get called, and there's always this possibility of great things, and sometimes great things do happen, but there's a lot of downtime,
oh,
particularly with this book.
oh man, for sure. So you do teaching, and then what else do you do outside of writing?
So I only teach in the summertime. So I teach at Boston University as part of their Summer Journalism Institute, which is actually for high school kids, and I love that. So I try to keep my hand in journalism so that I can be fresh for that. So I'm working on a piece now for the Globe, but it's based on the book. And right now I'm just in promotion mode, and I have changes that my agent wants on. I have changes that I'm considering for the Whaling Wives, which is my no. So once I get through this rush of early promotion and interviews, I have to settle down. First, I have to write the Globe piece, and then I have to start looking at my novel and going through and rewriting that. So, but I love rewriting.
Yeah,
I don't know about you. I hate the first draft. I love rewriting.
no, definitely. It's
Yeah.
much have something there that you can work with than
Yeah.
have a blank page where you have to just create everything.
Yeah. So,
I definitely understand that.
yeah.
Do you think that historical fiction is going to be maybe the new avenue that you take with your writing?
Yeah. So I love historical fiction. That's my go-to genre, Um, if there's some great opportunities in this kind of true crime thing, I would be open to that. But it would have to be I would be very choosy about the topic because it is such an investment in time and emotion. I want to get it, done a little quicker. This was required a lot of research, and it's and tricky research, so.
Oh yeah. Have you seen the show Only Murders in the Building?
No, I haven't.
So it's got a ton of famous people in it,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I would recommend it. But it's about a group of people. Somebody gets murdered in their apartment building,
yeah,
uh, high rise in New York.
yeah.
They start a podcast where they interview people and like try to figure out who done it, kind of.
Yeah,
And I think that, well, just an idea, it
yeah.
would be really interesting to have a podcast and a book where in the podcast, like that's where you would obviously have to get people's permission and stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
but including some of those interviews or
Oh,
other
yeah, yeah.
primary is alongside your book, and then that would serve almost as double promo because people go crazy for true crime podcasts nowadays.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think Danny would go along with that. So, but
yeah, maybe not for this case, but
yeah, not
for
for this case,
right,
Yeah.
those, and then because it would be things that you're doing already, and
Yeah.
then so
Yeah,
it would,
right.
it would be a way to, I don't
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
kind
So
of guess.
one of the most difficult things about this book was with my other publisher, I just did all the research, right? I knew that, and then the new publisher wanted waivers from everybody I interviewed.
Uh,
You don't do that in journalism. That's not normally what we do. And it's also really hard to go back to people after the fact.
right.
But, people were great about it. But nearly everybody was great about it. But it's, you kind of want to, I would like to know the ground rules going in.
Yeah. Do you, well, and it was hard with this situation because it was like, you had one thing and then that fizzled up and then you had to go somewhere else. But do you think that your next, if you were to write another true crime book, do you think the experience you had writing this one would aid in the process?
Yeah. This was definitely, I learned a lot during this project. I learned a lot about, you should see my files. Oh my God, you cannot believe how many files I have.
Oh my goodness.
But I did learn and a lot. So this was certainly, like really helpful.
Yeah. So we can wrap this up pretty soon. I've really enjoyed talking to you, but kind of like 3 questions.
Sure.
All about life lessons.
Yeah.
So you said you learned a lot from this book.
Yeah.
What is something or one of the greatest things that you learned about history, writing, and life?
Okay, so the greatest thing I learned about history is that it really was much worse. The time we're living in now is, you think it's the worst, it's not the worst. That when you go back to the 70s, you're like, man, things have gotten better. And also, I was living in the 70s. I survived that. A lot of people had it harder, obviously, but you can survive anything, really. So that's what I learned about history. The second one was about life. Was it life?
Writing, and then we can end with life.
Okay, so I think what I learned about writing, and this is I think simplicity is the best thing in writing, and that readers, one thing I learned through this and is journalism, is that you can't pack too much into a paragraph, because if you pack 3 facts into a paragraph, people will miss 2 of them, so that less really can be more. You have to time, and that's kind of the reason the style is. It gives you time to absorb the facts, and then you go on to some of the emotional stuff, and the suspense to keep you reading. So you have to entertain, and you have to not overburden your reader. So I think that's what I'd learned about this book, from this book. And about life, I said with my murder mysteries, I turned to the Buddhists. I started meditating to deal with the unpredictability of murder mysteries in the market. So I've started reading Stoic philosophy. And so the Stoics, if you look at every day, like every day is going to have problems, and these are the problems I'm going to solve today. This is my challenge today. Instead of looking at problems like something that's meant to trip you up, somebody's doing to you. It's problems are a part, and obstacles and challenges are a part of every day. And if you look at them as a game almost, and just, well, this is just today's challenges. Can I meet them? It's a lot more fun.
I love that. A beautiful thing to end on. I feel like I still have so many more questions for you. So maybe at some other point when you're, promoting your next book or something, we can chat again. But I had so much fun talking to you today.
I had so much fun talking to you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed your book too. It was great. Everybody, make sure that you go get Jan's book. It is called The Combat Zone. What's the subtitle? Murder, Race, and Boston's Struggle for Justice.
Thank you so much.
You can buy it anywhere, right?
Yeah, because of the supply chain issues, which are like just this month's obstacle, I think Amazon is getting it in, Barnes & Noble's getting it in. Also, your independent bookstore is always good to support, so.
Agreed. And Jan also has a website, janbrogan.com.
Yep. And I also ask, I'd like to ask people, if you read the book and you like it, if you post a review on Goodreads or Amazon, that's obviously going to help get the word out.
I will be doing both. I haven't quite done it yet because I just finished reading it yesterday, but I have a bunch of stuff written already that I'm all about to put in a 5-star review.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're
All
welcome.
right.
And last thing, make sure you're following Jan for all other updates regarding her books and this book. She posts a lot of interesting, like, newspaper articles and behind the scenes pictures from her research from this book. So make sure you follow her.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christina.
All right. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks
You
again.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hello. Thank you so much for joining me today.